When it comes to audience growth, everyone's looking for a silver bullet, something that will give you tons of followers overnight and endow you or your company with powerful influence over the people of the internet. And if you search audience growth strategies on YouTube, you'll see dozens of corny thumbnails that promise overnight instant growth. But as with most things in life, if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. My guests today have amassed 500,000 plus followers with their Florida-based media company and their two social media brands, I Love the Berg and That's So Tampa. They hold incredible influence over how quickly and successfully a new business or seasonal event can become in Southwest Florida. Any new business in our area knows that one of the best ways to get customers in their doors is to partner with Dex and Rob and to amplify their grand opening. They are not purveyors of hacky social media gimmicks or bogus get super popular schemes. They think bigger, longer, and more reasonably when it comes to audience growth. Dexter Fabian and Rob Sanchez, welcome to the Customer Engagement Lab, brought to you by Panda Doc.
Yay!
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
I really appreciate you fellas coming in today. I'm so excited. You've been on my list for a long time. We're 72 episodes into this.
I know.
You were wondering why it took so long.
No, I'm really excited to tell you all the hacks for growing your audience. Yeah, I've got a long list.
I brought Gary V. Jr. into the studio today with me.
I mean senior, really. But yeah.
It's great to have you here at our studios at Coastal Creative. I've got an opening clip I want to show you guys so we can just get the show rolling. We're ready to watch it?
Sounds good.
All right.
Hey, Gary.
Hey, my man. Yeah, how's it going, my man?
It's good. Look, I want to ask you something.
Okay.
I'm a storyteller.
Yeah, are you on TikTok?
Yeah, I'm on TikTok.
Okay.
About 3 million followers on there right now.
Bro, are you making content?
Yeah, I do one story a day.
Oh, bro, you could be making 7 stories a day, which is massively underrated. Yeah.
7 stories a
Yeah.
day.
What's your question, my man?
All right, so basically, I'm looking now to get into
Okay.
public speaking.
Yeah,
I
bro,
wanna-
if I were you, I would be calling into every single house in the United States of America, okay? Giving them public speaking tips in their bathroom, shower,
In their shower?
fucking garage. Yeah, in the garage. Yeah, bro, I was eating shit for 17 years, doing tips for free, okay, bro? You just gotta document.
You think
okay?
it's a good idea to call every single house in America?
Yeah, bro. Are you making this an NFT?
I'm making this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not making this now.
Okay, bro. Garage sales. Yeah. Do you want blueberries?
The ultimate hustler, right?
All right. I have to ask the two of you, what do you think of this impression of Gary V?
This is the first time I've actually looked at it, seen his video. I mean, and I was surprised. Wow, he has serious following,
Yeah.
and so I don't know how the impression really was.
I mean, it's a good impression. I don't watch most of his stuff because it's ridiculous generally, but I mean, it's a good impression, and he's definitely that hustle maniac, right?
Yeah.
If you're not working for 23 hours a day, you're not going to make it work. You're always missing out. You're always doing something else, and I mean, there was a time when I used to think like that. Not that crazy, but that you really had to just be doing everything under the sun, and
Sure.
Now that is not my status. That's not what I like to do.
Well, who's
at
got
all.
time for
Right.
everything?
Right.
That's the thing. It's
Yeah, maybe in
You have
your
to pick
early
and choose.
20s, you know, but
I think the fun fact about this guy doing that impression of Gary V is that he actually got to meet up with Gary V and hang out. It eventually did reach Gary's people, which was fun. And he was just explaining how he does he's just I've always just been really observant. And so I was picking up on the little things, he always bites his nails. I'm like, Gary does always do that. And
I mean, he's got to be pretty anxious with some stuff going on in the background there. I would
I mean,
assume.
for as big as Gary V is now, he probably is a caricature of something.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's pretty
true.
cool.
Yeah.
Do you think they should try to build a following like this? Is your advice to my audience that they should just do what this guy said?
It depends on the kind of following you want to build. I mean, if you want to be a personality like Gary Vee is, then you have to have a shtick. His shtick is the ultimate hustler, right? So it's
Right.
if that's your thing, it can work. I mean, these people, it can blow up fast, and either you can have some actual valuable content that does. Like Gary Vee, I mean, he has good stuff. There are good nuggets in there, even if I don't agree with all of it. But like some people, you can blow up super fast and then it just fades away.
Right.
So it kind of depends on what you're looking for, you know?
No, I've actually had to Google Gary Vee and look at one of his videos. And to your point, it's like, it didn't take him overnight to build a cult following, I don't think. It took him like a few decades at least, you know? So
the comedian there was like, I've been eating shit for 17 years.
Yeah, so it has, whatever your shtick is, it has to make sense for you, and it has to be something that you can stick with for as long as you want, you know? If it's going to have any kind of traction, you have to be able to dish it every day or whatever. Yeah.
Year after year, which brings us to our first section of the podcast, long-term audience growth versus short-term gimmicky hacks. So for the first part of our show, I want to focus on this topic. Let's talk about long-term audience growth, short-term gimmicks. I put together a clip as I was just doing research for this podcast episode with you guys on TikTok of the most annoying content on earth, in my opinion, which is content about how to get more followers on social media, which is kind of what we're doing here today, and that's the irony of it.
I just gained 120,000 new followers in under 10 weeks.
How I've grown 10K followers on TikTok in just 2 weeks.
You need to be doing this if you're not gaining 1,000 followers a day on TikTok.
Here are 4 simple ways you can gain more followers and get those followers to interact with your content more.
I gained 3,000 followers on TikTok just today, which is unbelievable to even say it.
3 steps to realistically gain 100 followers per day. Number 1, figure out what your audience cares about the most within your niche. 2, provide a better experience than other creators in your niche. This could be editing, storytelling, high value, or just overall quality. 3, post as much content as possible on a consistent basis.
I left that guy's advice in there because I was like, actually, some of those are off.
Yeah. Actually.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
I liked his the best, and his clip was like 15 seconds. I was like, all right, guy, you got, and he was like 100 followers a day. I was like, that's a reasonable number.
Right. That's very reasonable.
Not 1,000.
Yeah.
I wish it were that easy.
I wish it was too.
Yeah.
And let's dive into the history of your company, RKC, which is the overarching company of I Love the Burg and That's So Tampa, and a lot of the projects you do. Gary Vee, I think, was still eating shit back in 2009, but I'm curious, like, what did your strategy look like, and where were you spending the most time? Back 2009, I had just started college at Eckerd College. I found I Love the Burg. I was like, oh, this is wonderful.
So you're just trying to age me at this point?
You've been at it for a while, so I'm curious what was working back then? What was hot?
Right. So I think it was a good time back in 2009, 2008 for we were kind of a startup marketing firm. My partner and I started it 2006. 2008 was housing crisis.
Yep.
So we were trying to figure out how do we market ourselves in this community that we just moved into from New York. We didn't know anybody. All our friends up New York were like, where the hell is St. Pete? Why did you move there? That kind of stuff. And we were like, you know what? Nobody wants to talk about, ourselves, and because it's just not great marketing.
Yeah.
So we thought like, oh, St. Pete is a pretty cool city. It's got a lot of potential. We're discovering a lot of new things. So maybe this is what we talk about. And we started out as a Facebook page, to be honest, because it was like they had just launched it, I think, pages or whatever on Facebook. And then so every single day we'd try to find something quirky or cool tidbit about St. Pete. And we just kept at it on a daily basis, like answering, it started like friends or whoever was following. And then a few months later, it's like, oh, there's like 500 and then 5,000. And I'm like, oh, so it's becoming, a beast of its own.
Wow.
So we're like, okay, now time to start doing the actual content. But then we never thought of it as even basically a business, something that we'd make money out of. So it was mostly for us as a marketing firm to get our foot in the door to potential clients. Huh. And it worked out. we got our first clients. We got Kawa, the Mahaffey, all the Rowdies. So it did work out for us to get that foot in the door and start building a marketing business. So I Love the Berg was kind of like a on the side hustle.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we never even thought about making it a hustle. So I think that was kind of a good way of, or a good perspective to how it was built. Like it was all just organic stuff, and it was very truthful to what we thought of St. Pete, and authentic, and something we just wanted to share with other people. But as it did keep getting bigger, we started getting, we had to get into the other social media platforms. Instagram came in, and then we had to build our Twitter. We had to build a website and all that stuff. So we built it into the entity that it is now, and eventually it became the main hustle. So
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
14 years. I feel like you've seen the trajectory, and like I know Rob's come in the last couple of years, but you've had to like,
Right.
yeah. I mean, 14 years of doing social media content. I mean, you've seen the birth and the death
Right.
of like different platforms.
Exactly. I mean, we did Snapchat too at one point, but for us, it's like.
Clubhouse. I mean, all these things.
But that's the great part about being a creative marketing agency. It helped us be nimble with how social media evolved through the years. So at one point, it was just writing on a blog
Yeah.
and sharing this, and photos on Instagram, So, and then stories came in, and then reels came in. So there was a lot of, and then there was a lot of changes in algorithm, So what was Facebook prioritizing, So that kind of stuff. So we had to be nimble and be creative about transforming the way we produce and even our own skills. So we couldn't just be photographers or writers. Now we had to be kind of a little bit more multifaceted
Yeah.
in that way, so that we can actually keep up with basically the demand.
You first started this side hustle of I Love the Berg in 2009.
Right.
And you came in as like a new, you and your partner came in and were like, this is a new city we're living in. We want to start our marketing agency. And you've been doing it for 14 years. So I'm curious, like, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've had to face over this extended period of time?
Right. So, like I said, like we started out in 2009. It was a Facebook page. It was just a matter of posting and talking about what St. Pete is all about, just because we're trying to share what's cool about it with not just locals, but like our friends in New York or wherever they may be, and because most people didn't know what St. Pete was all about. So posting every day was one of the things that we just, okay, this should be easy, right? But then as time went on and followers grew, there's more people wanting more information. So it evolves into promoting events, what's new, new businesses, that kind of stuff. So the blog basically came in, a written version, which we basically create the content for. So on that, by then we had to started with freelance writers, so like, hey, could you help us out, yada, yada. Because, I mean, we did the writing ourselves too at that time.
Yeah.
So between the marketing agency and running I Love the Berg, it was kind of 2 jobs or something. Yeah. So eventually it grew and now it's like, like to say 50,000 followers, then there's Instagram and there's Twitter. So it was a beast on its own. And so we started creating almost like a department within our small agency of like, okay, you just focus on creating content for the blog. And At the same time, we had to evolve with how the social media platforms evolved, like depending on their algorithm or what they prioritized and the kind of content that they wanted. From writing, we had to evolve to taking good photos for Instagram, to creating Instagram stories, and then eventually reels. So to that point, we had the challenge of becoming more more skillful in different aspects of creativity. And that was like the advantage of being a marketing creative agency, is that it was, part of our DNA in a way.
Yeah.
To evolve and keep up with how technology changed. So
it's a crazy concept if you think about it. Like, the alternative when I moved here was like, you could check out the Tampa Bay Times or the Tampa Bay Business Journal. But it's like, for people my age, at the time I was 19, I was like, they don't get it. Like,
Right.
these articles aren't written for me.
Right.
And like, while they may there may be some overlap in content, yours was so much more approachable. And I think it's because you had this mindset of being a marketing agency, a creative agency.
Right.
The delivery of the content was like, we know how you guys like to consume content.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
brilliant.
Yeah. So like, we've always thought of social media as short attention span theater. So
short attention span theater.
right.
That's so good.
Yes, it's not. We're not trying to be the Times. We're not even trying to be, the Business Journal or Tribune, whatever. And so we wanted to, if anything, we wanted to have that friendly, authentic personality that people have come to like from the very beginning. So it was something that wasn't, what do you call this? Intimidating, I guess, for a lot of people to digest. So it's like, this is easy. I can go through whatever's going on in St. Pete in 2 minutes, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I don't have to like scroll and scroll and scroll.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're not trying to be, we're not trying to win the Pulitzer.
Right. And it's something that everybody can read and get something out of, versus like, if you're a business leader or in the know, you want to know all the background info, but like, just your casual people in the street aren't going to necessarily like read this long form content every time, right? They just want to know the gist, get it out there, and know what's going on.
It's cool how you kind of carved out your own niche, looking at the other players in the space, but that it started as just like this organic thing for your friends, and like a way for you to also learn and get and market your own like business as a marketing agency. Like, you don't see that very often. I'm curious, as we've gone through time, what are some of the social media tactics that nowadays, and Rob, maybe this question is for you as well, like, that you shy away from, or maybe you pass on because they don't align with your strategy? We watched these TikTokers who were like 10,000 in one day, and you're like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's a little crazy. I mean, I think overall, like, we try to strike that balance between like not doing clickbait, right? Which is it's basically video clickbait that we watch there. But also making sure that your headlines and your images are captivating, and that they like actually encourage people to click through and read more, and finding that balance between like having that short content that gets everything out for people and that long content is always, something we're thinking through.
So it sounds like passing on clickbait. When I hear clickbait, I think like controversy.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
I feel
so from the get-go, it was something. I mean, politics is one of those. It's like there's content that we more or less won't touch.
Yeah.
So, and we've been pretty good about it, and it's something that has been good for us and our audiences as well. We try not to get into polarizing, debate or whatever. Just because, I mean, as an agency, we actually did work for political campaigns, and it just wasn't fun for us.
Yeah.
It turned out to be a little too either below the belt or too personal, that kind of stuff. So it was like, you know what? That's not the kind of content that I really want to do. So that became our mantra, so to speak, like all things good.
All things good. Yeah.
I love the mantra of all things good, and I think our society needs more of that, and the internet needs more of that,
Right.
of just like not polarizing, not clickbaity, not controversial, and a lot of the stuff that the TikTokers were saying was just like, a lot of them were just saying like, you have to post 3 times a day and like
Right.
these types of things, and it was very repetitive. But you guys are pretty consistent with your
Yeah.
content, and you
Yeah.
have been for a long time. So I'm curious of like, what does long-term growth mean for your company? Is it just posting every day for 14 years? How do you like think about all that?
So I mean, I do think you need to be consistent,
Right.
And I think it depends. There's a spectrum there, but we do post multiple times a day on pretty much every platform, and that is important ultimately for your audience, but also for the algorithms. It is true that they want you on there, right? They want you in the app. They want other people in the app as much as possible. So I do think that's an important thing to do. But I think making sure that it's not just garbage content, right?
Right.
And that it's authentic stuff, and that you're actually producing things that people still
Want
want
to consume. Yeah.
consume. Yeah, absolutely.
So, like you were saying, it's just not considering how small our crew is. So it's not like we're churning out 20, 30 articles a day or whatever. But so for us, we're more cognizant of the kind of content that we produce. Does it benefit the audience, our community, and is it something that people want to read about? So there's still always that in the back of our heads, like every time we decide on actual publishing something.
Yeah,
feels like real people behind the content as well.
Right.
Going
that's
back to
been
it,
very important for
like
us. Yeah.
what you guys said of just like not just creating content that's going to get a lot of views because it's
Sorted.
hateful or angry,
Right.
make people angry with emotion. I feel like you guys do a good job of taking all of the emotions out of your content except for just like joy.
Yeah.
Which again, going back to like what
There might be a
people
couple
need.
more in there for some people, a
Yeah.
couple different emotions, but
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think, but it is important to look for the topics that are going to resonate really well and
That's
can
true.
get you a lot of, bang for your buck. Like new businesses tend to like perform really well for us, like a big event that's coming. So we know certain themes that do perform well, and those are almost like our clickbaits. Like they're like still extremely valuable, but those are the things that we know are gonna like drive impressions right away.
Right.
Like a Florida listicle of like best,
Yeah.
places to get coffee in the state of
Right.
Florida or whatever.
Yeah,
I feel like
absolutely.
when I
Yep.
was scrolling through your content, you guys do a good job of having like broad stuff that might be more applicable to anybody visiting the state, and the state's very well known internationally, to very niche thing like, hey, the corner coffee shop that just
Right.
opened up for,
Yeah.
and maybe that's only
Yeah.
applicable to like 3,000 people within like a 10-mile radius of that, place.
And it could be even smaller sometimes. Sometimes we just write a story that we think is, it's just a really interesting local piece. Maybe it's about somebody in particular and something that they've done. And we know it's not going to get 100,000 impressions. It might get 5,000, but it shows, I think, the soul of the city and shows really what we pay attention to. These are actual things that we run across and like we think are interesting, and we want to tell
Right.
that story.
So like piggybacking on that, it's like for us, it's still it's just as important considering the following that we've amassed. That if we did tell a story that wasn't a general topic, I think it would still garner some eyeballs for the right people, and it gives them a platform to get the word out on something that's great. For example, I think the art scene is kind of it doesn't typically get a lot of buzz, so exhibitions, small galleries, that kind of stuff. We try, as much as we can to sprinkle it in every so often, just to balance things out, and especially for topics that we try not, most blogs would probably shy away from. I think we have that capacity to shine a light on those. Like, especially, I don't know. I mean, I'm getting into things that I think are important for me. Like,
Right.
you know,
It's not
like,
politics necessarily.
yeah, no,
but
no.
right,
Like,
right.
and sometimes we don't do enough, maybe. But we try to get into like social justice, social equity issues, or at least, but not, without having to be in your face. We try to educate, we try to inform. Like recently, we started doing history. A lot of history content.
Yeah.
Just because we feel like, okay, considering the growth of this city, I think we should try to always take a step back and look at what happened before, good or bad, and so people know what what to avoid, I guess, or at least see how this came about. Like if there's any issues on like segregation. I mean, it's still something that happens. Like it's still very current, especially now. How things are. But we what we do is kind of provide that platform for uplifting these kinds of information or personalities or artists or events, basically. Does that make sense?
It does. It comes from a place of, you said it, education. We're just
Right.
trying to provide education and an insight that it doesn't have a certain slant to it,
Right.
or that's going to make you feel bad when you read it.
Right. You
Right.
could easily go that approach.
Yep.
You could easily go that approach and arguably could get more
More-
impressions and
Yeah.
more of a
Right.
bang and more controversy around it. But we really try to take it from that, not necessarily objective standpoint, because we're not objective. Like we have our own thoughts and beliefs, but we try to put it forward, in a way that's helpful.
Yeah.
I think is the key aspect. Is like we want to move the city forward in a good direction and
Right.
tell that story.
Sustainable, I guess that's where sustainable growth or smart growth comes into play.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you about, which is like most people, when they start something like this, probably aren't thinking to themselves, I'm going to still be doing this 14 years from now. So my
Right.
question to you, Dex, is like, what advice do you have for somebody, and like, how have you just stayed with it? Like, what keeps you going?
A lot of coffee.
True.
I don't know. It's like, I guess it's addicting in a way for us. Like, okay, once we see our, this is probably where we feel our, what do you call this, gratification from, is when we get, random emails, DMs, like, this is the best thing you guys do, so many good stuff. Love you guys, I love the Berg, that kind of stuff. It's like, you know what, that means a lot. I mean, it doesn't happen very often, and sometimes you get
Sometimes
a
you
lot
get
of
the opposite.
yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
Facebook comments like,
yeah.
why are you posting this? Like, what the hell? Yeah, it's like,
It's usually when a big skyscraper goes up and
Oh,
everyone's like,
definitely, yeah.
oh my God,
Yeah.
ruining the city again.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
there was one like they were saying, why do you keep calling it Tampa Bay? Tampa Bay is a body of water.
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
Everyone's
your
got
issue?
something to say.
So that's good to hear though, because I don't get it as often, but I don't know, once a month I'll get somebody that DMs me and is just like, love the show, like,
Right.
keep going. And that is what definitely helps keep me going. So
Right. And then like for us, especially as a big, I would like to think we're a pretty big, well, a good chunk of what this community is. And to be able to influence anything happening and what's going on in the city is a reward in itself.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's like it's pretty cool. Like when we see people go to events that normally wouldn't, there would be flies, people actually attending. It's like, oh, this is great. We did this.
Yeah.
If there's a line around the corner, great. It's like we're doing the small business a huge favor. And they're thriving. They're especially, like over the pandemic, that was one of the things that we were trying to figure out, like how do we help restaurants who were struggling and, because they didn't have seating or whatever. So it's like we started the St. Pete Supper Club on just Facebook as a Facebook group, and just highlighting as many on a daily basis. Like every day we would post a restaurant and what they're great for, and why they should get a to-go order or whatever, So, and that resonated really well. Like, people loved it. And that I think is, considering the time too, that all these advertisers were leaving because they didn't have anything to spend on.
Yes.
So
and we're gonna get into that later in this episode for sure.
So those are like, I guess, some of the good stuff that keeps us moving, that keeps us going forward. And we do hope that, a lot of organizations, especially the big ones in this city, find that value in what we do too.
I think that's a great message to those who are like, I want to try to figure out like how he's stuck with this for 14 years, him and his team and his partners, and it's addicting, is what you said. It's rewarding, and I'm seeing an impact, and I'm hearing about the impact. So if you're somebody that's like, I want to try to create long-term growth, find something where it's addicting for you, where you're getting these little hits of like dopamine or serotonin, where you're like, I did a good thing, people liked it. Yeah. That's a clutch like piece of advice for people to just kind of keep you going. Like, you have to see that reward coming back to you. Let's go to section 2 of this podcast. Ad-supported versus paywall subscription models for audience growth. Switching gears a little bit to talk more about your business and revenue model and how it impacts your audience growth. I want to show you guys a Reddit screenshot that I took as I was scrolling through. It talks about, for those that are just listening, the post is, why must everything be a subscription now? Gas stations, groceries, drugstores, pet frickin' store, all want you to get their stupid loyalty card to get you to hand over your personal info. Can't use the self-checkout at certain grocery stores without the card anymore. Streaming subscriptions are out of hand. I don't want to get a subscription to watch platforms where there's only good show out of 3,000 garbage ones. You want to read an article online? Guess what? You'll be giving up all your info and money for a poorly written piece of crap with typos. There's got to be a better way of doing business. I don't know. So,
harsh words right there. Yeah.
I do think this does sum up how some people, this was from a year ago, how people are starting to feel, though, as there's just everything's a subscription.
I would love to hear them now, a year later, because it's definitely gotten more so.
So my question to you is, why did you choose to go ad-supported in the first place? And this is a question that'll open up to both of you and what it's like now for you.
Well, do you want to talk about why you went ad-supported in the first place?
Okay. I mean, for me, we've just been doing it for so long now. Like, when the idea of even a subscription or paywall, wasn't even around. And for us, it's like, this is content that we just want to share with everyone anyway, So it's like, why are we limiting distribution just by putting that paywall or whatever? It kind of didn't make sense for us to go backwards and kind of have people maybe hate on us.
It also, I feel like it doesn't align with what Rob said earlier, where like the people behind this is, you were like, I want to put out content that's good for the community.
Right.
And if I put a paywall in front of it, it's like the opposite of what I'm trying to achieve, which is like democratizing good content that educates people and helps our city.
Yeah. So a good example was when we started doing virtual historic tours.
Yeah.
So we started that because of the pandemic. And initially we were like, should we charge for viewership on this one at least, just so we can have something to also create revenue in a way? But eventually at some point I was like, it doesn't make sense. I wish this was more of a, just a public access TV, like, almost like a PBS, which is where, luckily at that time, I reached out to Kanika, who was the deputy mayor of the city, and she was like, loved the idea, loved the concept and how it's promoting our, St. Pete as a with a cool history, kind of.
Yeah.
And so basically, they helped us by their support make it into something that's just public access, basically. So
Through
that's
like a grant or foundation or something?
yeah,
through the city?
yeah, basically.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a cool way to go about it. And then, yeah, Rob, for you, like, I'm sure there's been discussions, you know, of like, should we put a paywall up, go the route that business journals go? What's kind of stopped you guys from going that route?
Actually, we did introduce a membership about 6 months ago, but it's a different spin.
Okay.
So, you know, I think overall, like, we like being ad supported and being sponsor supported because it lets us reach more people, right? I mean, if you put up the paywall, it restricts your audience growth, and it also makes you kind of really tie into, okay, well, who's that specific person who's going to pay for it? If it's a business journal, like, you can only really write business related stuff, right? That's what they're paying for. So, you know, I think it's a good approach. It does have its challenges and its limits, but we started testing a membership and a subscription. Two parts. One, because it is an interesting business model. I think that's why you see a lot of people do it. The recurring revenue aspect of it is very appealing. But we didn't want to just go the standard route with it. So
I like the idea of having an option. So, like, for example, I think this is like Netflix is introducing like its version where you can, you know, pay a little bit less per month, and there's going to it's the ad supported version.
Right.
Or if you're like one of those people that's like, I hate ads, I don't ever want to see them, I'm going to fork over a little bit extra to do that. In the case of like I Love the Berg, That's So Tampa, perhaps a subscription model is also for like diehard fans of the content that are like, we're willing to pay for this because we love them, we love their content, and we want to support their business to make sure it's sustainable for a long period of time. So it's like having both, like, hey, we're an ad supported. We have to run this business. Somebody has to write this stuff and pay the bills. But we don't want to block anybody. Every time I see a cool headline from Tampa Bay Business Journal, I'm like, well,
I'm not seeing the article.
I'm not going to watch that one. I guess this is only for people who can give $15
and that's why we think of it as more of a membership than a subscription. And in our case, it is for the super supporters. It is to kind of like have a funnel, right? Like almost like a freemium type concept where you have people who do love and really appreciate what we do, and we offer them a little bit more, a little bit extra, you know, on top of it.
That's it. I think that's a smart way to do it. Which model do you think is better for consumers and for business leaders? Do you have thoughts one way or the other? I'm sure people listening to this are wanting to hear like your thoughts on like, I want to start some sort of, you know, blog or media company or something in my area, and I'm not sure which route to go. I need a little bit of money to like get this thing going and pay my bills. So I'm just curious of like if you have any extra thoughts on like
starting out. I mean, it's a long road ahead. For sure. If you have the bandwidth, the capacity, the patience for it, go for it. As long as you know what you want to get out there and not just like, let me just wing this. I don't think that works. I think you kind of have to have a more or less solid idea of what you're good at, or at least, you know, what you can talk about that you can be good at, and be able to stick with it for a long time without probably seeing a penny for a good time. But I don't know. Like some people have become overnight successes, you know?
Like that's rare.
Yeah.
I feel like we love to highlight those people. I heard, I think it was Tim Ferriss on his podcast had Guy Raz, the guy from How I Built This.
That's a great point.
And they were talking, and he dropped this beautiful quote, which was like, we overestimate how much we can do in 1 year, but we underestimate how much we can do in 10 years. And I think that's like such a perfect quote for a business that's been around for 14 years. Of people who are like, I want to build a Patreon in 1 year and have like a $250,000 income. And it's like, that's awesome.
Great. Yeah.
That's very ambitious. But let's remember what you can actually accomplish.
Yeah. I think it all ultimately comes back to like the value you're creating. And I think like it sounds really simplistic, but when I read this Reddit, it's like he's first complaining about like having to give over all my personal info, right? So he's basically saying like, or she is saying like, I don't know what I'm getting out of this, right? I'm kind of being forced into this thing.
Yeah.
Or like the second part is like, they say garbage. Like, I don't want to pay for garbage. So like,
Yeah.
I get that, but there's certain subscriptions and certain things I pay for that I get a ton of value out of, and I wouldn't give up if if somebody tried to force me, I'd be like, no, I'm going to keep paying for this thing, right? So like, it really does matter. Like, what are you putting out there, and is it resonating with people?
And have you proved your value?
Exactly, because
Have
you
you
can't
had
start
enough time
asking
to-
for money
Right out the gate.
right? Until
Everyone's
you've
like, what
shown
am
the
I paying
value
for?
right?
Yeah,
And built
well
the
said.
trust. It really is like it goes hand in hand. People aren't going to pay for something they don't see value in or trust.
Man, I love that. All right, let's move into section 3. I've got one last image to show you both. Let's pull this up. It's in the same vein of what we were just talking about, but this is an image from a subreddit called Data is Beautiful. It is a bar graph that, yes, has actual labeled X and Y axes, as one of the top comments pointed out. It's the New York Times has transitioned from an advertising-led business to a subscription business. And the New York Times, let's also put into context, has been around for a very, 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 very long time. It is internationally known. It is a news source, not necessarily the same of what a media company like I Love the Berg and That's So Tampa and RKC are providing. But I'm curious, like, looking at this graph, it's showing like they started a digital subscription, but what I'm most intrigued by is like their total revenue hasn't really skyrocketed. It's just helped them be more sustainable.
Yeah.
Right.
But you're not seeing like a huge jump all of a sudden at the end. And again, for those that are just listening, it's started in 2003 going all the way to 2002, and we're seeing like the ups and downs of the New York Times revenue and where those sources are coming from. And they've got different shades of colors for advertising, digital subscription, and then the print circulation. You're seeing, most surprisingly to me, is that the print circulation has stayed pretty dang like,
yeah, that's surprising. Yeah.
like steady.
Yeah.
A quarter of
even
the
in
business.
2022, it's still making up 26% of the revenue. The digital subscription is at 41%, and advertising is getting smaller, but not like a crazy amount smaller.
Right.
Any thoughts here that you guys are looking at this?
I mean, I think it's interesting because it shows ultimately like subscriptions are valid. They're not dead, even if there are a lot of them. It once again comes down to the value. But I think you have to look at this and say like they are a major player. They've been around for 100 plus
They've
years.
proved their
right?
value.
Right. They prove their value, first of all, but they're also adapting with the times. They're basically saying like, hey, if advertising was going to keep getting us for the next 20 years, we'd just keep doing that. But they're looking at it and saying, well, what changed? So it looks like around 2008, 2009 changed. I mean, I think partly tech changed. The platforms came out, partly the financial crisis then too. So ad dollars shrank and they had to adapt with it. So, I mean, I do think it's a interesting business model. I think it's just a matter of how you apply it to what you're doing.
Yeah, and I know that one of the, like, one little dot will be Dex's digital subscription to the New York Times. I'm pretty sure he has
yeah,
one.
exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like, I mean, I'm looking at this but it's the New York Times. So first and foremost, they're huge,
Multi-billion dollar.
They're not just US, they're international. So definitely like apples and oranges, whatever. For us, it's like we're such a hyper local entity that it's really almost. That's why it becomes hard to get into the whole subscription paywall kind of scenario.
You're servicing the southwest region of Florida.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe one day you'll be like, we're going to take over the entire state of Florida.
Probably next year, actually. Well, actually, I was thinking the country.
Dex is like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But the, like, I know that the Tampa Bay area of Florida is one of the largest metropolitan areas of the state,
Right.
but it has its limits.
Yeah.
Much more of the limits than the New York Times
Right.
has. So and again, it strays away from like why you started this all.
Right.
It's
Yeah,
like
so
hyper local, like
Exactly. And for us, it's like, for me especially, it's like I want to be able to grow it sustainably. I don't want to just, start adding a lot of people and staff, whatever, and just because I don't know what next year, 2 years from now looks, and we also want to hold on to, the identity, the kind of personality that we have, I think growing it in so much bigger kind of waters down a lot of that. So we just have to be careful, basically.
God bless you, Dex Fabian. I wish more business leaders could say that and actually believe that. Like, so many people are focused on hyper growth, especially in technology, which is my world. It's like the gold rush of the 2000s is the tech world. So there's just like VC money being thrown around, and it's like, how fast can you scale? You know, how quickly can you become profitable? And it's like that mindset that you just said, like, we want to be sustainable.
Right.
We want to think long term. We don't want to have to like get into a position we don't know what next year's going to look like.
Right. So, and that probably was brought about by the pandemic too. For me, it's like all of a sudden it's like, okay, how am I paying for my salaries and that, that kind of stuff? It becomes
real.
Like you want to make sure that everyone is taken care of. At least for me, it's like that's important for me. Like, okay, everyone has their healthcare.
Yeah. I mean, they're different approaches, though.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like, there's validity to like scaling fast and trying to get an exit of some sort. I mean, if your goal is an exit, then you need to grow quick.
Fast,
you need to dominate your space. If you want a sustainable, lifestyle type business that is gonna be on the smaller side generally, or just takes longer to get to a really big point, then they're just different approaches, and it changes everything that how you think about the business model, how you think about your target audience.
I think we just found the sound clip for like the teaser of this episode. That was so well read. So well said. I'm curious what your audience looked like the first few years. You mentioned when we were talking earlier, you were like, oh, it was just like, 500 of my close friends at first. Next thing I look at, it's 5,000. Was there a point where like it really took off?
Yeah, I think it was around that time when it was like, okay, like nobody really, like local had a following of even 5,000 followers, that was kind of unique.
Mm-hmm.
So, and even then at that time, like we already started seeing copycats in a way.
Was it about a year after you had launched like your first blog article when you hit like that 5,000 mark?
Probably, yeah, right about there.
Okay.
So it didn't really happen, it didn't take too long. But we did set goals for ourselves, like, okay, it has to be, 50,000, 75,000, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's something that we just had to consistently work on. And I forget what the question was.
I think you're answering it, and you're also answering my next question, which is like,
you're just ahead of the game.
Is there anything that like that you were doing that you were like, oh, this just drove a bunch of new followers for us? Like, was it a specific platform where you were first to be there and like do it really well? Was it like going around and being in person and like kissing babies, shaking hands like a politician, and like getting everyone to know, like handing them business cards? Was it like...
It is a combination of everything.
Yeah.
Seriously. Like it does take a lot of networking still.
Yeah.
A lot of meeting the right people.
I think it's underestimated. It's undervalued, is like the networking and meeting people behind the scenes, whether it's locally or just in your industry. It really, you meet the right people, and it can really, help you propel forward.
Right. But the good thing is like, I Love the Berg, because of all these years, has like that certain cachet already that it's a little easier to permeate scenes, like, okay, like, oh, you're I Love the Berg guy, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not so much of a hustle to establish, like, I have to do a spiel and like
sell them
on what we're doing, or so now it's like Rob and I we've talked about this a million times. Like we've basically hit critical mass, and it's now most people, even transplants, it's the first thing that they know.
Yeah.
It's like they're coming here and they're like, oh, I was on I Love the Berg before I moved here just to see what was happening, and
where brought them into
where I was like trying to move into. It's like, is this the city for me? So like I wanted to see what the culture was. So,
and same from an advertiser standpoint too. To be totally honest, I mean, like most of 90+% of our partners are inbound inquiries.
They're coming to you.
They're coming to us because they know that we put thought, and they can see the work, they can see the results being driven for other businesses, other events in the area, and so they reach out to us, and we constantly are talking with our partners and trying to evaluate what we have and is it working for them. It's really important for us that it actually works for them, that we're driving that value for them, because the inbound leads will stop if our advertisers aren't getting anything out of it. They will.
Yeah, and like with advertising, we don't want to force anybody into it. It's like it has to make sense for you, or
we're not salespeople.
I'm not hard sell or whatever. It has to make sense for us too. Otherwise, it's like I'm not promoting a plumber or
unless it has an angle that we can actually take on it. We try to find that.
Yeah, which we've been pretty good about. But so
you're gonna get an angry DM from a plumber.
I was gonna say there might be a lot of plumbers watching. And
I need one actually. Paging all plumbers.
On your mind, yeah.
My last question for you is: you said you hit critical mass. I'm curious what the future of audience growth looks like for you, and if we were to talk in 5 years, where are you hoping to be at? 1 million followers? How long do you want to keep this going for?
Rob's pretty good about setting goals year after year. So
so it's hard to say because we're across so many different platforms, right? So it's hard to say okay, we have X amount of Instagram followers, X amount of Facebook followers, X amount of website visitors. Who are there? How much overlap is there, right? So that's a first point. So it's hard to say exactly, but I think I tend to think about it as more of a percentage of your target audience, right? And I think there's probably a natural cap somewhere in the 50% mark, and especially locally, right? So St. Pete, the region's about 300,000 or so people in southern part of the county, plus travelers. So you're looking at about 150 to 200,000 followers. In terms of people who are actually paying attention, it might be hard to break past that. Now you can reach a lot more people because someone shares the article, but in terms of core followers, it's probably hard to get much past that. Tampa's bigger, so I think we have room to grow in Tampa, and we saw that last year. We didn't really put much focus on that blog. It was kind of the
red-headed stepchild.
Right. It was just off to the side, and we focused on it, and we were able to get that up. But I mean, I'd say 500,000 followers in the next
I aggregated all your platforms, by the way.
Yeah.
If you want me to launch those out right now, I will.
Okay. Yeah.
On I Love the Berg, you have 23.5 thousand on Twitter, 80.2 thousand on Instagram, 145,000 on Facebook, and 5.1 thousand on TikTok. And then on That's So Tampa, you've got 10.4 thousand for Twitter, 103,000 for Instagram, 134,000 for Facebook, and 9.5 thousand for TikTok, totaling 511,000 followers on those 4 platforms for 2 brands.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I did some homework.
And I do like thinking about that, in terms of setting goals. Is partly we set just internal goals of okay, how much do we want to grow, but also it is fun to look for the big numbers. We just passed 100,000 on That's So Tampa Instagram, and that was a big moment, you know. Right. And now we're okay, I Love the Berg. How do you get from 80 to 100? And it is cool to look for those milestones that keep your team motivated, and just kind of show off internally, hey, look what we're doing here. This is growing.
Because for us, the numbers, it's the proof is in the pudding kind of situation. If it's advertisers, partners.
Yeah. They're how many impressions? How many is this going to reach?
So it has to make sense. If it's a business that's trying to bring in people through the door, then we have to be reaching X amount so that that happens for them, So the numbers do have a significant role.
It's interesting. I was thinking about so That's So Tampa probably grew 30 to 40,000 followers just last year. So it actually did have, what I'd consider somewhat exponential growth for a local niche audience.
But at the same time, we did put a lot of effort.
And that's what I was going to say, is that it was all around consistency and around value. So there is truth to that.
So the TikTokers were right at the beginning.
They're partially right. I will give you that. But you have to add in the value.
Or they can just buy bots or something.
Right. Yeah. Or just start posting about getting more followers, and then you get the more followers. You know?
Yeah.
I wanted to just like scrub my eyes out after watching some of these. I think I learned so much from the two of you. Thank you so much for coming onto the show today. I want to try to like summarize and recap. So it sounds like the first few years, it was a combination of getting the word out, creating good content that your friends would like, selling, doing some hard selling in those first like 1 to 3 to 5 years of, you know, trying to hustle that,
Right.
hey, this is a brand. And then it sounds like 5 to 10, there was like, hey, we're along for this economic ride of roller coasters of the pandemic hitting things and then shifting to like a sustainable long-term thing. And then getting it to a point where it's at now where like we don't have to hustle quite as hard. We're getting some inbound thing because we've just been consistent with good content that proves its value. And that's the journey. Like if for people who are like, how do I make this happen? It's like time, sticking with it, some hustle in the beginning, some intermittent hustles, adjustments when things don't go your way.
Right.
And bringing in good people to help you sustain it.
Yeah. So being nimble is like it's really, really important for us, considering how small we are.
And getting addicted to like the good moments, right? Like the good feeling.
Get your
moments.
dopamine.
Celebrate the wins, you know?
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well,
thank
you can find I Love the Berg and That's So Tampa on all of the platforms I listed earlier.
Everywhere.
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. You can also check out their website.
Subscribe.
You can subscribe. You can become a member.
Yeah.
They can subscribe for free.
True. Or become a member for paid.
Exactly.
If you love us that much.
I mean, just saying. Yeah.
Well, when you guys are ready to expand to the state of Florida, I'll be looking forward to like that expansion into like Manatee County, Sarasota County. We'll be here for the ride.
Cool.
Thanks, Travis.
Appreciate
Thanks
you
for having us on.
Dexter and Rob. Hope you all enjoyed this and stick around for the next episode of the Customer Engagement Lab brought to you by PandaDoc. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Customer Engagement Lab brought to you by PandaDoc. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or connect with us on LinkedIn. We love to hear from you and what you think of the show.